We're watching a global energy crisis unfolding right now. And it seems that it's being deliberately orchestrated or at least exacerbated by unknown parties. What's more, these events perfectly fit the astrology we've seen over the last month, as you'll see later in this video. As viewers of this channel will know, I was expecting fireworks in April, and unfortunately we got them, although not quite in the way I was expecting. I was worried about the potential for nuclear incidents in early April, and to be sure, we saw some very scary stuff at that time. There were attacks on Iran's Bushehr nuclear power plant, and on April the 7th, US President Donald Trump threatened Iran, saying that, quote, "a whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again." Many observers interpreted this as a threat to use nuclear weapons. It's hard to know how serious Trump actually was, since he does seem to employ a kind of mad dog negotiation style. But there have even been allegations by former CIA analyst Larry Johnson that Trump actually wanted to use nukes on Iran, but he was blocked from doing so by General Dan Waites, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I'm not sure whether I believe that, but what's clear is that the threat of serious incidents involving nuclear technology was very much in play in early April. Thankfully, things didn't escalate into an actual meltdown or the use of a weapon, at least as far as we know. And on April the 8th, a ceasefire was agreed between the US and Iran. Now, the signature configuration of April was a conjunction in Aries between Mars and Saturn, as well as Neptune, Mercury, and the Sun. Mars and Saturn are antithetical in nature. Mars, the war planet, wants to move and take action, while Saturn opposes that and wants to put the brakes on. And so Mars-Saturn aspects can see blocks to action and frustration. And thankfully this time, this Mars-Saturn conjunction brought a ceasefire in the Iran conflict. Interestingly enough, that ceasefire arrived on April the 8th with peace-loving Venus in its own sign of Taurus at 10 degrees of that sign. That put it right on the midheaven of the Iran natal chart. Let's hope it holds. Frankly, I'm not sure. But anyway, while that ceasefire has been in place, we've seen other explosive developments. And here I want to refer to the video I made with the second house remote viewing team, for whom I set a target of viewing the events related to that astrology of April, in particular the Mars-Saturn conjunction and events related to it. Each of their sessions was quite different, but all 5 of them saw explosions or their aftermath.
Wham! Felt sudden, hard, forceful, quick. Felt dangerous, strong, powerful. I had a feeling of anxiety, fear.
A building being destroyed, energy being exchanged.
Given that those sessions were done well before the Iran war started, I'm thinking it's possible that what they saw could have been the actual conflict and things like missiles hitting Tehran. But I think they may also have been seeing something else, because what we've seen over the past few weeks is what looks like a covert campaign to damage or destroy oil facilities all over the world. Almost every day over the past month, we've seen explosions at oil refineries and pipelines, including in Malaysia, Vietnam, Australia, Pakistan, India, Romania, and Russia. And frankly, I think it's very scary and weird that it's not being talked about more, because almost everything in this world right now depends on the supply of oil. Now, besides Mars and Saturn, among the planets involved in the April Aries pileup were Mercury, which is the planet of trade and markets, and Neptune, which is the planet of oil. The triple conjunction between Mars, Mercury, and Saturn was very tight indeed. And it seems to have indicated that what this new Mars-Saturn cycle will concern is this energy crisis, which will have big effects on the economy and the markets, which are the domain of Mercury. And this is also very fitting because it's all happening in the fire sign of Aries. But I also said I thought we should expect deceptive or illusory events like false flags. That's the signature of Neptune, which has been all over the events of April. And there's clearly a deceptive, covert element to these attacks on energy infrastructure. Much of the mainstream reporting on them is framing these explosions as accidents that are all occurring in a vacuum. Perhaps some of them are accidents. But given how many of these incidents there have been in so many different places, it seems very obvious that someone has to be orchestrating at least some, probably most, maybe even all of them. One perspective I keep returning to is that we're watching the unfolding of a second Cold War here, where the principal adversaries are the US on one side and China on the other. It's been suggested that recent US actions in Venezuela, Cuba, and Iran are in part designed to seize control of the global oil market and put pressure on China. As I said in last month's forecast and the remote viewing video, the Mars-Saturn conjunction came at 7 degrees of Aries, which is almost exactly opposing the Sun of the China chart at 7 Libra. That suggested that China would come under attack somehow or engage in conflict itself. Perhaps that's what all these moves against oil infrastructure are actually about. Given that Ukraine seems to be playing a role in this campaign by attacking Russian oil facilities at precisely this time, that gives me certain suspicions about who may be behind it all. But right now, that's all they are, suspicions. What's clear is that the Iran war and this sabotage campaign are leading to really high oil prices, which could rise even further, leading to what's known as demand destruction, meaning that the price could rise to the point where parts of the economy need to be shut down. Indeed, that's already happening. Germany's Lufthansa airline just cancelled 20,000 short-haul flights in Europe over the summer. Some observers are suggesting that this energy crisis represents COVID 2.0 and that so-called energy lockdowns are coming. I'd be pretty skeptical that people will be told they can't go out of their homes, as in the COVID lockdowns, but it's true that people are already being asked to work from home and conserve energy in many parts of the world. What is clear astrologically is that Saturn and Pluto are in orb of their sextile aspect, the first major aspect since their conjunction in January of 2020, when the pandemic broke out and governments imposed draconian measures to try to contain it. And so I think that sextile is confirming a thematic connection between this period and what happened in 2020. This energy crisis may well end up forcing us all once again to accept new restrictions on what we're allowed to do, as well as force us to internalize the concept that we should indeed be limited and controlled for the sake of energy conservation. Are we being conditioned for some sort of new normal? We probably won't know the answer to that question for sure until we can look back on this period from the benefit of more hindsight. But I also pose another question, which, to be clear, I'm not the first or only person to ask. And it derives from the observation that governments and corporations are hell-bent on rolling out massive AI data centers around the world. And that ain't so you can make pretty pictures or Instagram reels. It's because they want to be feeding the AIs gargantuan amounts of data about what we're all doing. It's for the panopticon. And yet they're simultaneously telling us that we have to reduce our energy consumption because of global warming and now because of this energy crisis. So there's an obvious incoherence there. And so we should ask the question, why are we being asked to use less electricity when things like AI are allowed to suck up so much of it? Why aren't they shelving the data centers? Of course, I think we all know the answers to that. And so I think we need to pay very close attention to the size of the energy savings that we're asked to make versus how much is really needed and whether some of those savings end up powering the AI control grid instead. April also began with the news of NASA's Artemis 2 mission, which supposedly took 4 astronauts around the moon. This mission seemed to appear in Josh Maitland's remote viewing session.
This feeling of like a being or something in a capsule, life in a capsule or container that's kind of being held up, held aloft, ultimately positive, but, kind of in a UFO disclosure kind of way. But certainly, whatever this was intriguing and felt like it was, would change things in some kind of way. On my, my second page here, I, got this feeling of, something emerging from a structure, a life that was kind of up above observing this emergence of, what I called element X. And, there again, this observer was kind of like an overseer, like, watching this whole thing unfold. And I had this AOL of Prometheus, like giving the fire to humans.
Of course, a lot of people are very skeptical of NASA and its activities these days, and they're suggesting that this mission was fundamentally illusory for various reasons. There's Neptune again. On similarly Neptunian lines, Iranians and others on Twitter are claiming that since Iran destroyed a certain American base during the war, Iran and other countries in that region have been enjoying much more rainfall. And they're suggesting that the targeted base was actually manipulating the weather and had caused a drought in Iran. True or false? I don't know. But I did just deliver a long live stream on secret science that explores this and many other related themes, with a large cast of characters including Marsilio Ficino, Nikola Tesla, Donald Trump's uncle John Trump, and yes, Jeffrey Epstein. If you want to watch that stream, it's available right now for members of my website, worldastrologyreport.com, on the videos page. Oh, and one last thing, we have to talk a bit more about President Donald Trump, who was allegedly the subject of yet another assassination attempt on April the 25th. It's a sign of the times that an alleged presidential assassination attempt becomes an afterthought in a report like this, but here we are. At about 8:35 p.m. that day, a suspect named Cole Thomas Allen rushed into the Washington Hilton Hotel where this year's White House Correspondents' Dinner was taking place. Several gunshots rang out, but nobody was seriously hurt. Allen was taken into custody in possession of guns and knives. And the chart of that moment is quite something, because the moon was at 29 degrees of Leo, right on Trump's 29 Leo ascendant, in an almost exact square with shocking, surprising Uranus at 29 degrees of Taurus. It's a little too perfect, astrologically speaking. Of course, a lot of people are smelling a rat with this alleged event, which is coming amid Trump's flagging popularity due to the Iran war and all the rest. And there's something else that's rather strange about all this. On December the 22nd of 2023, an ex-Twitter account going by the name of Henry Martinez, with a Pepe the Frog profile picture, posted a single tweet. This was the only tweet that this account has ever made in its history, at least as far as we can see now. The tweet consisted of 2 words: Cole Allen. Yes, that's the name of the guy who was just arrested at the White House Correspondents' Dinner with the guns and the knives. I won't comment further than that, except to say that almost everything that happened in April has had Neptune's confusing, illusory stamp all over it. All right, that's it for our looking back section this month. Let's get into the forecast for May. If you're enjoying this video so far, then please do click the like button and subscribe to the channel to make sure to catch future videos. Doing that stuff really helps my channel, so thanks. Oh, and one more thing. I'm receiving more messages right now than I can manage to reply to. So if you emailed me recently and I didn't get back to you, please don't take that personally. I'm just a bit overwhelmed. For all of you who inquired about booking a consultation with me, I just want to let you know that I've opened up some fresh slots in June. So if you'd like me to read for you, please head to the consultations page at worldastrologyreport.com. May starts right off the bat with a full moon at 11 degrees of Scorpio. So this is a culmination or a revelation or a turning point in the dark domain of secrets, sex, psychology, desire, and deep human connection. The closest aspecting planet to this full moon is Pluto, which is squaring it from the 6th degree of Aquarius. And actually, Pluto is stationing retrograde right around this time, with its exact station coming on May the 6th. So the Plutonian energy of transformation through crisis is going to be much more active around this time. So there'll be a powerfully revelatory, excavatory feel to this lunation. Expect the revelation of secrets. Whenever strong Pluto activations arrive, it always pays to get ready to be very real and committed to truth. If you step up to the plate with bravery and openness, then Pluto rewards you with a closer alignment to what is true, and often with a greater sense of empowerment. The moon is also receiving a trine from Jupiter in Cancer, which is certainly helpful here, I think, and it'll hopefully, to some degree, take the edge off this lunation. As an aside, I think Jupiter's presence in Cancer since June of last year has really helped Scorpio placements, because Jupiter is casting a powerful and supportive trine into Scorpio, and that's made the sign a bit less intense than it can sometimes be. Now, in the mundane sphere, Scorpio governs tax, investments, research, death, and waste. Of course, this, and indeed any full moon in Scorpio, will also implicate Taurus, the sign of wealth, land, food, and luxury. Let's look at an example of what these Scorpio full moons can bring. We saw one last year at 22 degrees of Scorpio. In the natal chart for the People's Republic of China, the midheaven is at 23 degrees of Scorpio, very close to the degree of the full moon. And the day of that lunation, the US and China agreed to a trade deal that slashed US tariffs on Chinese goods, as well as China's retaliatory tariffs on US goods. So we saw a deal related to trade and finance, which is the kind of thing you'd expect with a full moon spanning the Taurus Scorpio financial axis. Now, the full moon of May the 1st is appearing at 11 degrees of Taurus, and there are at least two major mundane charts that are getting triggered by it. The first is that of Iran, surprise, surprise, which has a midheaven at 10 Taurus and an IC at 10 Scorpio. So the full moon is spanning that critical MC-IC axis. So something is coming for Iran at the time of this lunation, and you'd have to wonder if it's some kind of high-profile trade or finance or security deal, probably related to oil or to the Strait of Hormuz. Another chart getting triggered by this lunation is Russia's chart, which has a midheaven at 9 Taurus, very close to that of Iran. Who knows, maybe Russia is involved in that deal. More generally, regards Russia, Pluto is currently rolling over Saturn in the Russia natal chart, which makes me think that the country is due for some kind of serious restructuring over the current year or two. Historically speaking, Saturn-Neptune conjunctions, one of which is ongoing right now, have tended to bring regime change or the refixing of Russia's borders, historically speaking. It's a pattern that's held very well going back a long time into history. So I'd be surprised if we don't see one or the other of those things in Russia over the next year or so. I mentioned earlier that Pluto is stationing retrograde in Aquarius in May. It's doing so on May the 6th at 5 degrees and 30 minutes of Aquarius. Expect the themes of AI, technocracy, Zionism, war, and financial transformation to be prominent around that time. But how do we know that? Well, in the bonus section of this video, available for members of the channel, both here on YouTube and on my website, we dive deeper into Pluto in Aquarius, and I show you how I'm analyzing its transit through the sign by paying attention to events at station points, as well as the traditional divisions of the zodiac, like the Egyptian terms and 12th parts. All right, let's keep moving. On May the 5th, Mars perfects a square to expansive Jupiter. Mars is the planet of desire, action, and war. When Mars and Jupiter are in conversation, Jupiter can serve to expand or inflame Mars's actions and inject additional size and significance into the action being taken. But Jupiter is also the planet of faith, wisdom, and higher principles, so a Jupiter-inflected Mars can take action inspired by those things. And so Mars-Jupiter brings forth the archetype of the Crusader, the person who fights for principles or for faith or for things that are much greater than themselves. This is a square which is of the nature of Mars, and so it adds even more friction and potentially fuel to the fire. I could see this Mars-Jupiter square bringing protests, probably against fuel prices and the rules and restrictions that are gradually being brought in during this fuel crisis. Mars will square Jupiter at 19 degrees of Aries, with Jupiter at 19 degrees of Cancer. And among the places I could see being affected here are the UK, which has its moon at 19 Cancer in the 1801 chart, and Ireland, which has Jupiter at 17 Aries, close to where Mars will be. We actually saw a solar eclipse at 19 degrees of Aries back on April the 8th of 2024. And if you remember, that was quite the month. It was then that Israel and Iran first exchanged direct attacks. And it was also at that time that the big wave of pro-Palestine protests erupted at campuses across the United States. To be honest with you, I'm not 100% sure if this eclipse is still active, but if it is, I could see some of these themes being reactivated by this Mars-Jupiter square. Let's see. All right, let's now move to the second lunation of May, the new moon in Taurus. On May the 16th, we'll see a new moon at 25 degrees of Taurus. The closest aspecting planet to this lunation is Mercury, the messenger, which will be quite closely conjunct the sun and moon, and it will be closing down on a conjunction with Uranus, the Promethean awakener. Mercury doesn't have much strength in Taurus. It's a little slow moving for the swift messenger's tastes, so it doesn't have much essential dignity. But Mercury in Taurus does favor turning one's thoughts to practical and financial matters, to planning for the future. That could come in handy as this energy crisis comes into effect. Hint, hint. Generally speaking, a new moon in Taurus represents a time when seeds are sown in the Taurian domain, which is the realm of the harvest. And so it relates to finance, food, pleasure, the arts, land, and property. Given the strong influence of Mercury on this moon, it will have a much more intellectual or talkative feel to it than is usual with Taurus. Again, I think it could be a good time to think about how you want to deploy your resources and to plan for the future and for looming leaner times. Indeed, this lunation is going to have a heavier feel than you might expect because it's actually in a tight semi-square. That's a 45-degree aspect with Saturn in Aries. Saturn in Aries is about the need to stay true to yourself, to prove yourself, and assert your will in the face of opposition. And so there will certainly be Saturnian themes of limits and restrictions bound up with this lunation. And so in the mundane sphere, given where we are right now in terms of the burgeoning energy crisis, I could see new rules and restrictions being introduced at this time relating to the Taurian themes of money, food, land, and shelter. I think we could see the theme of food prices and even hunger appearing in the news in significant ways at this time. This new moon will also be conjunct the dread fixed star Algol, known as the Medusa's head. That star can bring up the theme of the wronged woman and more generally themes of violence and suffering. So honestly speaking, I don't expect this Taurus new moon will be much of a party. As an example of the kind of thing these Taurus lunations can signify, though, let's look quickly at last year's new moon in Taurus, which came on April the 27th of 2025. On April the 30th, just a couple of days later, the US and Ukraine signed the Ukraine-United States Mineral Resources Agreement, a deal that would see the exchange of profits from Ukraine's mineral extraction for ongoing US military assistance. So we get a big deal related to land and to wealth, which is the domain of Taurus. All right, let's keep pushing into May. We're going to see a ton of Gemini and Mercury activations in the second half of May. On May the 14th, we get a Mercury cazimi, meaning Mercury's exact conjunction with the Sun at 24 degrees of Taurus. These are always times worth noting because it's here that Mercury is in the throne room with the Sun. And so they bring moments of realization when the messenger whispers to us the solutions to problems that we've been chewing on. And then on May the 17th, Mercury enters Gemini, one of the two signs that it rules. And on May the 21st, the Sun follows Mercury into the sign of the Twins and Gemini season begins. Now, Gemini is now a different sign since Uranus's ingress into it on April the 26th. It's now the locus of Promethean inspiration, as Taurus was previously. And I think that's going to change how Gemini feels to some degree. It's always a fast-moving, forward-thinking, and dynamic energy, but with Uranus there, we're turning that up to 11. Gemini placements are now going to be subject to the same process of awakening and upgrades as Taurus experienced from 2018 to now. But I think Geminis will probably take this process in their stride a bit better than Taurus, which is a slow-moving earth sign whose nature is antithetical to that of Uranus. We're also going to see great splits and bifurcations appearing. Gemini carries within it the notion of duality, of two-ness. With Uranus in the sign, we can expect sudden disruptions and revelations that open us up to fresh ideas, technologies, and dualities. And we may already have a suggestion of one of the incredible developments that Uranus in Gemini is going to bring. Because Professor Filippo Biondi of the CAFRA project, which claims to have identified massive structures under the Giza pyramids using satellite radar technology, has announced another remarkable discovery. He claims that using the same technology, he's identified something amazing hidden on the Giza plateau, a second Sphinx. Now, this is so far unconfirmed. No dig has been done, but it would perfectly fit the symbolism of the movement of Uranus, the awakener, into Gemini, the sign of the twins. Incidentally, I predicted that we would see massive new revelations from Egypt over the course of the next year or two in this video. Now, Mercury will be in Gemini from May the 17th until June the 1st, and its presence there is a welcome one. This is auspicious for clear and incisive and detailed thinking. And that will be especially true in the last week of May as Mercury starts to emerge from the beams of the Sun. We haven't had a really strong Mercury for many months, I'm personally looking forward to it because I feel like I've been mentally swimming through thick soup for months now. In particular, in the first couple of days of its Gemini transit, let's say May the 17th and 18th, Mercury will be conjunct Uranus. Mercury-Uranus interactions are excellent times for generating ideas, insights, and solving problems. You could call this the genius aspect. On May the 21st, the Sun enters Gemini and Gemini season begins. Again, I recommend paying close attention to what happens during the first couple of days of this transit when the Sun will be conjunct Uranus. The Sun provides visibility, and so it could well clue you in to what Uranus's transit through Gemini will be about for you. And generally speaking, I think this part of May is likely to bring some very interesting news and innovations and revelations. Indeed, I wouldn't be surprised if they had to do with good old Jeffrey Epstein, whose Sun will be receiving a third and final trine from Uranus in late April and around this time. All right, let's keep moving forward and let's talk about what's happening this month with Mars, the war planet. On May the 18th, Mars moves into earthy, slow but steady Taurus, where it will be transiting until it moves into Gemini on June the 28th. And actually, just 3 hours later, Venus, Taurus's ruler, will enter Cancer, and it'll form a nice sextile with Mars, making that time a rather nice one for matters of love and desire. But Mars is traditionally seen as being in detriment or exile in Taurus, which opposes its home sign of Scorpio. Mars moving into Taurus is like driving into a residential area where the speed limit is annoyingly low. You can either be patient and just accept it, or you can get frustrated, which is a common symptom when Mars is in this sign. The key to dealing with Mars in Taurus periods is patience, because there are times when the speed that the world moves is misaligned with the speed that we want it to move at. Now, on May the 26th, Mars and Pluto will form their exact waxing square, which is the first hard aspect of their current synodic cycle. Hard aspects between Mars and Pluto tend to bring moments of fierceness and great intensity in which we're required to dig deep in order to overcome obstacles. At a mundane level, Mars-Pluto hard aspects tend to relate to conflict and sometimes to events connected to organized crime and intelligence agencies. But they tend to be less explosive than Mars-Uranus aspects and have more to do with deals and maneuverings. And given that Pluto is in Aquarius now, the theme of technology and warfare keeps coming up. But we can get some clues about what this Mars-Pluto square is about by considering what came at the start of their current synodic cycle. They last formed a conjunction on January the 27th of this year. That was actually the time of a 5-planet stellium in the sign of Aquarius. And I've looked back at that time now with the benefit of a little bit of perspective. And it's now pretty clear what the major development that stellium brought was. And it was the release of the Epstein files by the US Department of Justice. Aquarius is the forward-looking sign of the individual within the collective. And I think the release of those files did an enormous amount to help humanity in understanding the wider systems that are operating in the world now, and perhaps pointing us towards how we could try to move beyond them. I'd also watch Russia around this time. Mars will be close to the midheaven of the Russia chart at this square, and I could see some kind of violence or escalation affecting Russia around that time. The last time Mars hit the MC of the Russia chart on June the 23rd, 2024, came a massive coordinated round of attacks on churches, synagogues, and police in Russia's Muslim-majority region of Dagestan. All right, before we go, I have one last thing. Because May is an unusual month in the sense that there are actually 3 lunations fit inside its confines. And the third and final one comes on the very last day of the month. On May the 31st, we get the month's third lunation. This one is a full moon at 9 degrees of Sagittarius. And so there's a culmination or a revelation coming here around Sagittarian themes, including the quest, truth, persistence, and courage in the face of mortality. At a mundane level, expect the themes of international relations and trade, education, law, and publishing to come up, and faith. Indeed, I think this full moon could be a herald of important new knowledge coming into the world. The Gemini Sagittarius axis, which the sun and moon will span at this lunation, has to do with knowledge and wisdom. But there's something else. This full moon is taking place square to the lunar nodes, which will be at 3 degrees of Virgo and Pisces. And so this lunation will carry some eclipse energy. And as I've explained previously on this channel, these lunations at the bendings, as they're called, have a special role, that of bridging between eclipses. And so this moon will take forward things that emerged at the previous eclipse season, which came in mid-February and early March. And it will also foreshadow the next eclipse season, which comes in August with a solar eclipse in Leo and a lunar eclipse in Pisces. Now, that previous eclipse season was a real humdinger. It brought the release of the Epstein files and the US-Israeli attack on Iran. So I think we can expect this Sagittarius full moon to carry forward those things in some ways. It's yet another factor that suggests that Epstein could be back in the news in May. And events at this full moon will also foreshadow what the solar eclipse in Leo coming on August the 12th will bring. As the astrologer Wade Caves explained in this video, that eclipse is likely to bring major developments for Cuba. And so the full moon of May the 31st could bring foreshadowings of what's on the way there. And I've also said before that I think that Leo eclipse is going to be highly meaningful in terms of the spiritual knowledge that will emerge into the world under its aegis. It's hitting the charts of people like Edgar Cayce, Rudolf Steiner, and Helena Blavatsky, all of whom had a lot to say about Atlantis and ancient Egypt. And also thinking here of that prophecy of Chris Bledsoe's that I talked about in this video. I don't know whether he'll turn out to be right about Regulus and the Sphinx, but I do think we're going to see waves of important new knowledge washing over the world this year. And from the time of this Sagittarius full moon onwards, we're entering the part of the year when that's likely to happen. So we get ready for a summer of mind-blowing revelations with spiritual implications. And could UFOs be involved? I think they could. All right, that's it for this video. In the bonus section, available for members of World Astrology Report, whether here on YouTube or at my website, we do a deep dive into Pluto's retrograde and direct station since it entered Aquarius to try to get a better idea of what Pluto is doing in that sign. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again on the channel very soon.